It was quiet on the surgical floor at King's Medical Center. Maybe 6 in the morning. I was just standing at the observation window, looking out over the city as it started to get light. My coffee was already getting cold in my hands as I went over the day's cases in my head. I had 3 standard valve replacements and 1 bypass, a pretty normal day. My chief resident, Dr. Mark Jenkins, came up beside me, and I could tell right away that he was tense. "Dr. Sharma," he said, "we have a VIP admission. He was transferred directly from a private jet. It's a complicated aortic aneurysm, and he needs surgery right away." I turned away from the window. After 10 years as a heart surgeon, the last 3 as the head of the cardiovascular surgery department, I knew that VIP usually just meant a difficult patient and a family with unrealistic demands. "What's the problem with it?" I asked. "It's an ascending aortic aneurysm, and it's at high risk of tearing," Mark explained, looking at his tablet. "His cardiologist back home told him it was inoperable, said it was too close to the valve and the damage was too widespread. But the patient wouldn't take no for an answer. He insisted on coming here, to you. He specifically asked for the best heart surgeon in the country." I have to admit, I felt a small flicker of professional pride. My reputation had grown a lot over the last decade. I'd become the youngest department chief at King's, and I'd even pioneered a few minimally invasive repair techniques that were being taught in medical schools now. I had built that entire reputation from scratch, starting from the wreckage of my family life and a father who told me I would never amount to anything. "What's the patient's name?" I asked. Mark checked his tablet. "David Harrison, 65. He's the CEO of Harrison Global." He stopped, then looked up at me as the name clicked. "Wait, Harrison? Is he—" "He's my father," I said. My voice was flat. I set my coffee cup down very carefully, making sure my hand didn't shake, even though I felt a jolt of shock right through my chest. David Harrison was my father. It had been 10 years. 10 years since he'd kicked me out of his house. I was 17, and I'd just refused to give up on my dream of going to medical school. He'd told me medicine was a lowly trade, that I was wasting the Harrison name to go play nurse to sick people. It was 10 years since he'd cut me off completely, financially, emotionally, in every way. He told me to never contact him again, and now he was here, in my hospital, asking for the best heart surgeon, and he didn't even know it was me. Mark's voice was careful. "Dr. Sharma." "Anna, do you want me to assign this case to Dr. Petrova? Given the personal situation?" "No," I cut him off. "If the aneurysm is as bad as you say, he needs the best." "That's me. My personal feelings aren't part of the equation." I picked up my own tablet and pulled up his file. "When does he get here?" "He's already here. He's in pre-op suite 7. He's asking to meet with the surgeon before he'll agree to the procedure." Of course, he was. David Harrison never did anything without controlling every single detail, without making sure everyone in the room knew he was the one in charge. I wondered if he'd changed at all in 10 years. I wondered if he ever thought about the daughter he'd thrown away. I wondered if seeing him again was going to hurt as much as I thought it would. "Let's go meet the patient," I said. I tugged on my white coat, smoothing it out. The one with Dr. Anna Sharma, Chief of Cardiovascular Surgery, embroidered right under my name. The coat that stood for everything my father said I could never achieve. It was time to see if he still thought medicine was beneath the Harrison family. We walked through the surgical wing, my mind already shifting into work mode. An ascending aortic aneurysm with a high risk of dissection. It had a high mortality rate and would be a complex repair needing absolute precision. It was exactly the kind of case I'd built my career on, exactly the kind of challenge that made me one of the most sought-after surgeons in the field. My father had asked for the best. He was about to get exactly that, whether he liked it or not. Mark opened the door to pre-op suite 7. "Mr. Harrison, this is Dr. Anna Sharma. She's our chief of cardiovascular surgery." I stepped into the room, and it felt like time just stopped. My father was sitting on the examination table in a hospital gown. He looked older than I remembered, more gray and thinner. The powerful CEO was diminished by his illness, and I could see fear in his eyes. But the eyes themselves were the same. Sharp, assessing, always judging. Those eyes locked onto my face, then widened as the color drained from his already pale skin. "Anna?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What are you? You're the heart surgeon? You're the best they have?" "Hello, David," I said. I kept my voice professional, clinical. "I understand you have an ascending aortic aneurysm that needs surgical intervention. I've reviewed your imaging. While the case is complex, it is operable. I can perform the procedure this afternoon." He stared at me like I was a ghost, like I was something impossible. "You became a surgeon, a heart surgeon." "Chief of cardiovascular surgery, actually," I said. "King's youngest, if that matters." I pulled up his CT scans on the wall monitor. "Your aneurysm has progressed to a very dangerous size. Without surgery, you have about a 90% chance of it rupturing within the next month. With surgery, you have a 75% survival rate. Those aren't ideal odds, but they're the best you're going to get. I don't want you operating on me." The words came out harsh, a reflex. It was the same tone he'd used 10 years ago when he told me to get out of his house. "Get me another surgeon. Someone else. Anyone else." Those words hit harder than I expected. 10 years of success, of proving myself to everyone that mattered, and his rejection could still cut right through all of it. "I'm the only surgeon at this hospital qualified to perform this particular repair," I said, my voice steady, even though my chest felt tight. "Your aneurysm involves the aortic root and the ascending aorta. It requires a specialized technique that I pioneered. No one else here has the experience." "Then transfer me to another hospital," he demanded. "To another surgeon." "You don't have time for a transfer, Mr. Harrison." Mark stepped forward, his voice firm. "Your aneurysm could rupture at any moment. The stress of just transporting you could kill you. Dr. Sharma is your best chance. Realistically, she's your only chance." My father's jaw worked. His hands clenched on the edge of the examination table. I watched him struggle with the impossible situation. Die, or trust the daughter he'd thrown away to save his life. "Why did you become a surgeon?" he finally asked, his voice rough. "After everything I said, after I cut you off, why did you keep going?" I met his eyes. "Because you taught me one valuable lesson, David. You taught me that the only person's approval I ever needed was my own. You said I'd never amount to anything in medicine. I spent the last 10 years proving you wrong. And now, ironically, I'm the only person who can save your life." I paused. "So the question isn't why I became a surgeon. The question is, can you put aside your pride long enough to let me do my job?" The room was silent, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. David Harrison stared at his daughter. The girl he'd rejected. Now the woman who held his life in her hands. "How long until the surgery?" he asked quietly. 4 hours. We need to run pre-operative tests and get you prepared. The procedure itself will take about 8 or 9 hours. I pulled up his consent forms on my tablet. "You'll need to sign." "I'll sign," he cut me off. "But, Anna..." He stopped, struggling with the words. "If I don't survive this..." You'll survive, I said, my voice flat. I'm very good at my job. Even if you never believed I could be. I handed him the tablet with the consent forms. I watched him sign with a shaking hand. 10 years ago, he'd signed papers that removed me from his will, from his family, from his life. Now he was signing papers giving me permission to cut him open and repair his heart. The irony was not lost on either of us. I'll see you in the OR, Mr. Harrison, I said, and turned to leave. Anna. His voice stopped me at the door. I didn't turn around. Why are you doing this? After what I did to you? Why not just let me find another surgeon? Let me die rather than prove I was right about you. I looked back over my shoulder, meeting his eyes one last time. Because I'm a surgeon. I took an oath to save lives, even the lives of people who don't deserve it. I paused. And because I'm not you, David. I don't throw people away just because they don't meet my expectations. I walked out, leaving him alone with that truth. Behind me, I heard Mark say quietly, "Your daughter is the best heart surgeon I've ever worked with, Mr. Harrison. If anyone can save you, it's her. You should be proud." I didn't wait to hear my father's response. I had 4 hours to prepare for the most difficult surgery of my career. 4 hours to get ready for the moment when I'd hold my father's life in my hands and have to choose. Revenge, or the oath I'd sworn. 4 hours to prove, one final time, that I was everything he said I'd never be. I stood in the surgeon's lounge, staring at my father's CT scans on my laptop. The aneurysm was worse than I'd first thought. The tear extended further than the imaging suggested. The tissue was weak, and how close it was to the aortic valve made the repair exponentially more difficult. This wasn't just complex. This was the kind of case that ended careers when the surgery failed. It was the kind of case I'd normally spend weeks planning, consulting with colleagues, and running simulations for. I had 4 hours. "You don't have to do this." Dr. Lena Petrova, King's senior attending surgeon and my mentor, sat down beside me. "I can take the case, or we can transfer him. Let their team handle it." "He doesn't have time for a transfer. You said so yourself when you looked at the scans." "Then I'll do it. Anna, operating on family members it's exactly what I signed up for when I became a surgeon." I didn't look away from the scans. Every patient is someone's family member, someone's father, mother, or child. I don't get to choose which lives to save based on whether they hurt my feelings. Lena was quiet for a moment. "He threw you out. You were 17. You worked 3 jobs to pay for college while living in your car. You took out crushing student loans from medical school. You built your entire career from nothing because he decided medicine wasn't good enough for the Harrison family legacy." "I know what he did," I said. "And you're going to save him anyway." I finally looked at my mentor. "What choice do I have? Let him die to prove a point? That makes me just as petty as he is." "It makes you human, Anna. No one would blame you for recusing yourself from this case." "I would blame me," I said, closing my laptop. "I became a surgeon because I wanted to save lives, because I wanted to matter, because I wanted to prove that choosing this path, the path he rejected, was the right choice." I stood and grabbed my surgical cap. If I let him die now, even by omission, even by stepping aside and letting a less qualified surgeon take the case, then everything I built means nothing, become exactly what he always said I was, someone who doesn't have what it takes. Lena stood too. "You have nothing to prove to him." "I'm not trying to prove anything to him," I said. "I'm trying to prove it to myself." I headed toward the scrub room. I needed to see if I could save the life of someone I hated. If I could put aside everything he did and just be a surgeon. Because if I couldn't do that, then maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I was. In the scrub room, I went through the ritual I'd performed thousands of times. Scrubbing for 2 minutes. Nails, fingers, forearms. Methodical, precise. The physical action helped calm my racing mind. I stared at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. I had dark circles under my eyes from years of overnight shifts. I had lines beginning to form from stress and concentration. My hair was pulled back tightly under my surgical cap. I looked like my father. The same sharp features, the same intense eyes. The resemblance had always bothered me. This physical reminder that I came from him, that his DNA was part of me whether I wanted it or not. Mark appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Sharma, the patient is asking to speak with you before we take him to the OR." My hands stilled on the scrub brush. "Tell him I'll see him after the surgery." "He's insistent," Mark said. "He says he needs to tell you something before—" Mark hesitated. "Before the anesthesia, in case he doesn't wake up." I dried my hands, the paper towels rough against my skin. Of course. My father had last words. David Harrison always needed to have the last word, to control the narrative, to make sure everyone understood his perspective. I walked to the pre-op holding area. My father lay on the gurney, already in surgical attire, IV in place, monitors beeping steadily. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished by the hospital setting that stripped away all his CEO authority. "You wanted to speak with me?" I kept my distance, professional, clinical. I wanted to apologize. The words seemed to cost him something. For 10 years ago? For throwing you out? For telling you medicine was beneath you? I waited. Apologies were easy when you were facing death. Words were cheap when you needed something from the person you'd wronged. "I was wrong," David continued, his voice rough. "I can see that now. You've built an extraordinary career. King's youngest chief of surgery, a pioneer in your field. Everything I read about you when I looked you up after I got sick." He stopped, gathered himself. "I was wrong about you. About medicine. About everything." "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Why apologize now, when you need me to save your life? Why not 5 years ago, when I made chief of surgery? Why not 7 years ago, when I published my first paper? Why not 10 years ago, before you threw a 17-year-old onto the street?" "Because I was proud. Stubborn," he said. "I convinced myself you'd failed, that you'd come crawling back, begging to join the family business." He looked away. "But you didn't fail. You thrived. And I was too much of a coward to admit I'd been wrong." I felt the old anger rising, the hurt I'd buried under years of achievement. "You destroyed me. Do you understand that? You were supposed to be the one person who believed in me, who supported me, who was proud of me. And instead you threw me away like garbage because I didn't want to be a businessman." "I know." "You know?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "You know, David, I was homeless. I lived in a shelter. I ate at soup kitchens. I worked overnight shifts at convenience stores just to afford application fees for college. I had professors who took pity on me and let me sleep in their offices when the shelter was full. Tears burned my eyes. Years of suppressed pain were finally breaking through. And you knew. You knew all of it. Your secretary told me. She called me 3 years ago after she retired and told me you'd been tracking me. That you knew everything I was going through, and you did nothing." My father's face crumpled. I convinced myself you needed to learn the hard way. That struggle would teach you to value the family business. I was waiting for you to give up and come home." "But I didn't give up," I said. "I succeeded. And that's what you can't forgive, isn't it?" I wiped my eyes angrily. I proved you wrong. I became extraordinary at the thing you told me I'd fail at, and now you need that expertise to survive. Anna, no. You don't get to call me that. You lost that right 10 years ago. I stepped back. I'll perform your surgery because I'm a professional. Because I took an oath. But don't mistake professionalism for forgiveness. I will save your life today. And then I never want to see you again. I turned to leave. His voice stopped me. Your mother would be proud of you. I froze. My mother had died when I was 12. Cancer, sudden and devastating. She'd been the one who'd encouraged my interest in medicine, who'd read anatomy books with me, who'd told me I could be anything I wanted. Don't you dare, I said, my voice shaking. Don't you dare use her memory to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating. I'm stating a fact. Caroline would be proud of the surgeon you've become, the person you've become. David's voice broke. She'd be proud. And I should have been too. I'm sorry I wasn't. I left without responding. I couldn't respond. If I stayed, if I let him keep talking, I'd break down completely. And I needed to be focused. Clinical. Perfect. Because in 2 hours, I'd be cutting open my father's chest and holding his life in my hands. In the surgeon's lounge, I sat with my head in my hands, breathing carefully, forcing the emotion back down. Lena found me there. He tried to apologize, I said without looking up. Right before surgery, when he's most vulnerable, most likely to say things he doesn't mean. Maybe he means it, she said. Maybe facing death gives people clarity. Or maybe facing death makes people desperate enough to say anything to get what they need. I stood, squaring my shoulders. It doesn't matter. I have a job to do. I walked to the OR, to the place where I was most competent, most confident, most myself, where my father's opinion didn't matter because my skills spoke for themselves. The surgical team was already assembled. Nurses, anesthesiologist, perfusionist, and Mark as my first assist. They all knew who the patient was. They all watched me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Let's begin, I said, my voice steady. We have an ascending aortic aneurysm with dissection extension. I'll be using a modified David procedure with valve-sparing root replacement. Estimated time is 9 hours. Any questions? No one spoke. They trusted me. They'd seen me perform miracles in this OR. Now I just had to perform one more for the man who told me I'd never be capable of miracles at all. The OR doors opened. They wheeled in David Harrison, already sedated, already intubated, already completely dependent on his daughter to save him. I picked up my scalpel, looked down at my father's chest, and took a breath. Scalpel to skin, I announced, and made the first cut. The first 3 hours went perfectly. I worked with the precision that had made me famous in cardiac surgery circles. Every cut was exact. Every suture placed with micrometer accuracy. The aneurysm was exposed, the damaged tissue identified, the repair planned to the smallest detail. Mark assisted with quiet efficiency, anticipating my needs before I even asked. The surgical team moved like a choreographed dance, everyone in perfect sync. This was my element. This was where I was most myself. Preparing to clamp the aorta, I announced. Anesthesia, confirm patient status. All vitals are stable, Dr. Sharma. Ready for bypass. I placed the clamp, isolating the damaged section. Blood flow stopped to the aneurysm. The heart-lung machine took over, keeping my father alive while I worked on the most critical part of the repair. And that's when I saw it. Damn, I breathed. The dissection extends into the arch. It's further than the imaging showed. Mark leaned closer. Can we still use the planned approach? I studied the tissue carefully. The dissection had weakened the aortic arch beyond what the CT scan had revealed. My planned repair wouldn't work. The tissue was too damaged, too extensive. I needed a different approach. We need to extend the repair, I said. Include the arch. But that means circulatory arrest, Mark finished. Deep hypothermia. We'd have to cool him down, stop his heart completely. It's the only way to get adequate exposure for the repair. I looked at the anesthesiologist. Can we do it? Can we safely cool him enough? It's risky at his age, he said. The longer he's in circulatory arrest, the higher the risk of neurological damage. My mind raced through the options. The standard repair wouldn't work. A partial repair would leave damaged tissue that would fail within months. Only a complete arch repair would give him a real chance. But a complete arch repair required stopping his heart, cooling his body to protect his brain, and risking everything on a procedure that had only a 60% success rate, even in ideal conditions. This was the moment. The choice. I could do a partial repair, close him up, and give him maybe 6 months to a year. It was the safe, conservative move. No one would blame me. Or I could go for the complete repair, risk his life on the operating table, risk brain damage, organ failure, death, but give him a real chance at survival. What do you want to do, Anna? Lena's voice came through the intercom from the observation deck. She'd been watching the whole surgery, ready to step in if needed. I looked at my father's exposed heart, beating steadily under my hands. The heart that had given me life. The heart that had hardened against me when I needed him most. The heart I now had to decide whether to risk. We go for the complete repair, I said. Prep for deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. We're going to fix this properly. Anna, that adds 4 hours to the surgery, Lena said. It increases the risk exponentially. Are you sure? I'm sure. If we do this halfway, he dies slowly over the next year. If we do it right, he has a real chance. My voice was firm. I didn't become a surgeon to do half measures. We're fixing this correctly. The team shifted into a higher gear. The anesthesiologist began cooling my father's body temperature, degree by careful degree. The perfusionist adjusted the heart-lung machine. I continued working, exposing more of the aortic arch, preparing for the most complex part of the repair. 45 minutes later, my father's body temperature had dropped to 18 degrees Celsius. His heart stopped. His brain activity ceased. He was, for all practical purposes, dead. I had 20 minutes, maybe 30 if I pushed it, to complete the arch repair before brain damage became inevitable. Time started, the circulating nurse announced. Clock at 0. I worked in the eerie silence of circulatory arrest. No heartbeat, no breathing. Just the quiet efficiency of my hands, repairing damaged tissue, replacing the diseased artery with a synthetic graft, suturing with microscopic precision. 15 minutes, the nurse called. Half my time was gone. My hands never wavered. This was what I'd trained for. The ability to work under pressure, to maintain precision when every second counted, to stay calm when a life hung in the balance. 20 minutes. I was pushing the safe limit now. Every additional minute increased the risk of neurological damage. But I was so close. The repair was nearly complete. Just a few more sutures. 25 minutes. Dr. Sharma, The anesthesiologist's voice held a warning. "We need to restore circulation. Brain ischemia time." "I know the time." I placed the final sutures, checking the repair now. I examined my work with critical eyes. Perfect. The graft was seated correctly. The sutures were secure. The repair was complete. I'd done it. I'd fixed an injury that 3 other surgeons had called inoperable. "Remove the clamp. Restore circulation." Blood flowed back into the repaired vessel. I watched carefully for any signs of leaking, any weakness in the repair. Nothing. The graft held. The heart-lung machine began rewarming my father's body. 28 minutes total circulatory arrest, the nurse reported. Beginning rewarming protocol. Now came the waiting, the slow process of bringing my father's body temperature back to normal, restarting his heart, hoping that 28 minutes without blood flow to his brain hadn't caused permanent damage. I stepped back from the table, my hands aching from the intense concentration. 9 hours of surgery, 4 of those in the most complex cardiac repair I'd ever attempted, all to save a man who told me I'd never be capable of this. "Beautiful work, Dr. Sharma," Mark said quietly. I've never seen anything like that. The precision, under that time pressure." "It's not over yet," I said. "We need him to wake up neurologically intact. That's the real test." We waited as the rewarming process continued. 30 minutes. 45. I watched my father's monitors, willing them to show the brain activity that would mean success. "I'm seeing cardiac activity," the anesthesiologist announced. "He's coming back." The heart monitor began beeping. Slow at first, then stronger. My father's heart, repaired, strengthened, saved, was beating on its own. "Neurological status?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Too early to tell. We'll know more when he wakes up." I closed his chest, each suture as perfect as the ones inside. I'd done everything right, used every bit of skill, knowledge, and innovation I possessed. Now it was up to fate, biology, and whether 28 minutes had been too long. In the recovery room, 2 hours later, I sat beside my father's bed, watching the monitors. He was still unconscious from the anesthesia. It was still unknown whether he'd wake up as himself or as someone fundamentally changed by oxygen deprivation. Lena found me there. "You should rest. It'll be hours before he wakes." "I need to know," I said quietly. "I need to know if I saved him or just gave him a different kind of death." "You did everything perfectly. The repair was flawless. Anna, I've been a cardiac surgeon for 25 years, and I've never seen anyone handle circulatory arrest with that level of precision. Whatever happens, you gave him the best chance possible." "What if it's not enough?" "Then it's not enough. But it won't be because you weren't skilled enough. It'll be because medicine has limits." Lena squeezed my shoulder. "You can't control everything, Anna. Even you." But I stayed, watching, waiting, needing to see the outcome of the choice I'd made, to risk everything to save a man who'd risked nothing for me. Hours passed. Night fell. The hospital quieted around us. And finally, my father's eyes fluttered open. David Harrison's eyes opened slowly. They were unfocused at first. I leaned forward, my heart pounding despite my clinical training. This was the moment of truth. Would he recognize me? Would he know where he was? Would his brain have survived 28 minutes without oxygen? "Mr. Harrison, can you hear me?" I kept my voice professional. "Do you know where you are?" His eyes moved to my face. Recognition flickered. Anna. His voice was hoarse from the breathing tube. Hospital. Surgery. He paused, his brow furrowing. You operated on me. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to grip the bed rail. He was neurologically intact. His memory was functioning, his cognitive abilities preserved. I'd done it. Against the odds, against the risk, I'd saved him completely. The surgery was successful, I said. We had to extend the repair to include your aortic arch. You were in circulatory arrest for 28 minutes, but everything went perfectly. 28 minutes. His eyes widened. That's extremely dangerous. It was the only way to repair the full extent of the damage. You had two choices: a partial repair that would fail within a year, or a complete repair with significant risk. I met his eyes. I chose the complete repair. I chose to give you the best chance, even though it meant risking everything. Why? The question was simple, but the weight behind it was enormous. After what I did to you, why risk so much? Because that's what surgeons do, I said. We save lives, even when it's hard, even when the patient doesn't deserve it. I stood up. I'll check on you tomorrow. Rest now. I walked toward the door, exhausted, emotionally drained, ready to finally let myself feel everything I'd suppressed for the past 12 hours. Anna, his voice stopped me. Thank you for being better than me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked at him, I'd break down completely. Get some rest, David. You have a long recovery ahead. I left, closing the door on the man I'd saved, and the complicated emotions I had no idea how to process. 3 days later, I was reviewing post-operative scans when my assistant knocked. Dr. Sharma, your father is asking to see you. He says it's important. I had been avoiding his room, sending residents to check on him instead. But I couldn't hide forever. He was my patient. I had responsibilities. David was sitting up in bed when I entered, looking stronger. Color had returned to his face. The monitors showed steady improvement. Your recovery is progressing well, I said, staying near the door. Another week, and you'll be ready for discharge to cardiac rehab. I've been reading about you. He gestured to a tablet on his bedside table. Your publications, your technique for valve-sparing aortic root replacement, the method you used on me, it's revolutionary. Only a handful of surgeons in the world can perform it. That's why I'm chief of cardiovascular surgery at King's. I called 3 colleagues, he said, CEOs whose companies work in medical technology. They all said the same thing. Dr. Anna Sharma is the best cardiac surgeon under 40 in the country, possibly the best in the world for complex aortic repairs. He paused. They didn't mention you were my daughter, because you don't use our family connection. You built your reputation entirely on merit. I don't have a family connection to trade on, I said. You made sure of that 10 years ago. David flinched, but didn't look away. I was wrong. About everything. Medicine isn't beneath the Harrison name. You've brought more honor to our family than I ever did building factories and selling products. I didn't do it for the family. I did it despite the family. I know. That's what makes it remarkable. He struggled to sit up straighter. Anna, I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those years. But I need you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because you saved my life, but because you became extraordinary at something I tried to destroy. I felt tears threatening. I'd wanted these words for 10 years. I'd dreamed of this moment. But now that it was here, it felt hollow. Proud? My voice shook. You're proud now? When I saved your life? Where was that pride when I graduated from medical school, when I finished my residency, when I made chief of surgery? I was too stubborn, too proud myself to admit I'd been wrong. His voice broke. Anna, I tracked you. For years. I knew every achievement, every success. And every time I told myself I'd reach out, tell you I was wrong. But I couldn't. My pride wouldn't let me. So you waited until you needed me? Until your life depended on me? No. I waited until I was dying and realized I'd wasted 10 years being too cowardly to admit the truth. David's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry for throwing you out, for not supporting you, for not being the father you deserved. I turned away, wiping my eyes angrily. I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I'm asking for a chance to be in your life again, to finally be proud of you the way I should have been all along. 2 weeks later, I presented my surgical technique at the American College of Cardiology conference in Chicago. The auditorium was packed. Cardiac surgeons from around the world had come to hear about my innovative approach to complex aortic repairs. I stood at the podium, my slides showing my father's case. Anonymized, of course, but detailed enough to demonstrate the technique. The key, I explained, is maintaining precision during circulatory arrest. Every second counts, but rushing leads to errors. The balance between speed and accuracy is what determines success. I walked them through the procedure, step by step. The audience was riveted. This was groundbreaking work, the kind that would be taught in surgical programs for decades. During the Q&A session, a renowned cardiac surgeon from Johns Hopkins stood up. Dr. Sharma, this technique requires extraordinary skill and nerve. How did you develop the confidence to attempt it? I thought about my answer carefully. I developed it out of necessity. When traditional approaches fail, innovation becomes essential. I learned to trust my skills because I had to, because patients' lives depended on it. I didn't mention that I'd developed that trust during years of having no one else to rely on, that being thrown out at 17 had taught me self-reliance, that my father's rejection had forged the independence that made me willing to pioneer new techniques. After the presentation, surgeons lined up to speak with me, job offers, collaboration requests, invitations to teach at prestigious programs. My career had always been successful, but this presentation elevated me to a new level. I was packing up my materials when I saw him. David Harrison. He was standing in the back of the auditorium, leaning on a cane, but otherwise looking healthy. He'd been there the whole time, listening, watching me receive the recognition I deserved. Our eyes met across the room. He nodded slowly. It was a nod of respect, of acknowledgement, of pride. Then he turned and left, giving me this moment without complicating it with his presence. My colleague noticed. Was that David Harrison, the CEO? I didn't know he was interested in cardiac surgery. He has a personal interest, I said quietly. A very personal one. That evening, I found a message on my hotel phone. It was my father's voice. Anna, I watched your presentation. It was extraordinary. You're teaching the world something they didn't know was possible. I'm sorry I wasn't there for every step of your journey, but I'm grateful I got to see this. I'm proud of you. Your mother would be proud too. I sat on my hotel bed, listening to the message 3 times. 10 years of waiting for those words. 10 years of proving myself. And now, finally, validation from the person whose opinion had once mattered most. But something had shifted. His pride no longer defined me. I'd learned to be proud of myself. 6 months after the surgery, I received an unexpected invitation. The Harrison Global Annual Gala, a massive charity fundraiser my father hosted every year. I'd never been invited. I'd been explicitly uninvited, actually, after the expulsion. The invitation included a handwritten note. "Please come. I'd like the company to meet my daughter, the cardiac surgeon, the innovator, the person I'm most proud of in the world. Dad." I stared at the note for a long time. Dad. He'd signed it Dad, not David or Father. A small thing, maybe, but significant. I almost didn't go. The thought of facing the company executives, the board members, all the people who'd known about my expulsion and said nothing. It was overwhelming. But Lena convinced me. "He's trying," she said. "It's clumsy and late, but he's trying. You deserve to see him try." The gala was at the Harrison Global Headquarters, a gleaming building in downtown San Francisco. I arrived in a simple black dress, professional, but not extravagant. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. My father met me at the entrance. He looked healthy, strong. The surgery was a fading memory. "Anna, thank you for coming." I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. He offered his arm. "Come inside. There are people I want you to meet." He led me through the gala, introducing me to everyone. "This is my daughter, Dr. Anna Sharma, Chief of Cardiovascular Surgery at King's." Not just my daughter, not hiding my profession, but actively highlighting it. The executives responded with genuine respect. Several mentioned they'd read about my technique. One said his mother was alive because of a procedure I had performed. I wasn't just David Harrison's daughter here. I was Dr. Anna Sharma, respected in my own right. Near the end of the evening, my father took the stage for his annual speech. I stood in the back, ready to leave, when his words stopped me. 10 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life," David said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "I told my daughter that medicine was beneath our family, that choosing to be a surgeon instead of joining the family business was a waste of her potential." He paused. I was catastrophically wrong. The room went silent. Everyone knew the Harrison family history. The expelled daughter was company legend. Anna became a cardiac surgeon. Not just any surgeon, one of the best in the world. She pioneered techniques that are saving lives globally. And 6 months ago, when I was dying, she saved my life with a procedure only she could perform. His voice broke slightly. She had every reason to let me die, to walk away, to let me face the consequences of my prejudice. Instead, she risked everything to save me. I felt tears streaming down my face. People were turning to look at me, but I couldn't move. "I'm standing here today because my daughter is better than me," David continued. "Because she chose compassion over revenge, because she became extraordinary at the thing I told her she'd fail at. Anna," he scanned the crowd, finding me. "If you're still here, I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. And I love you. I never stopped, even when I was too stupid to show it." The ballroom erupted in applause. People stepped aside, creating a path from me to the stage. I walked forward, tears blurring my vision, and my father met me halfway. We stood face to face, 10 years of pain and separation between us. "I forgive you," I whispered, "not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." David pulled me into a hug, the first in a decade. "Thank you," he said, "for saving my life, for being brave enough to forgive, for being everything I should have seen you were." I held on to my father, feeling years of hurt beginning to heal. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But maybe, finally, we could rebuild what he'd destroyed. Because that's what surgeons did. They repaired what was broken. They gave things a second chance. Even families, even relationships shattered by pride. Even hearts, literal and metaphorical, that everyone else said were beyond repair.